Wir schauen uns heute die atmosphärischste und wahrscheinlich realistischste Call of Duty Mission aller Zeiten an. Das Ganze wird analysiert, auseinandergenommen. Ich bin sehr, sehr gespannt, weil ich und viele von euch werden diese Mission schon gespielt haben. Vielleicht ist es einem gar nicht so richtig aufgefallen und ich bin ein großer Fan davon, von solchen Analysen. Und dann checkt man irgendwie erst so im Nachhinein wie, krass, wie geil das eigentlich gemacht ist, ne? Wo man es dann einfach nur gezockt hat in dem Moment. Wir gehen rein, lasst ein Like da, lasst ein Abo da. Let's go.
Right behind me, there are some guys who are about to break into somebody's house for some reason. We're supposed to head back there so they can start their mission, but what if instead we didn't? What if we just stood right here and
Wir machen wieder die Untertitel für euch an. Ich vergesse das immer.
took in the atmosphere? What would we find? We'd find one of the most atmospheric missions ever in a Call of Duty game and one of the most uncanny representations of a real-life space in any game. But it's probably not for the reasons you think. One of the reasons, for example, is that the stars in the sky are weirdly blurry and all of them are smeared. Why would they do that? I'll tell you about that later. This is a mission called Clean House from the...
Trinken. Das ist euer Zeichen, jetzt eine Wasserflasche, ein Glas, einen Shaker oder sonst etwas zu nehmen und etwas zu trinken. Stay hydrated oder so.
The hit 2019 video game Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and it's the first time in a long time that the Call of Duty series has had a mission transcend the micro-zeitgeist of its release to leave a lasting impression on the wider culture.
Zeitgeist ist auch ein englisches Wort. Zeitgeist? Hat er das gerade gesagt?
And the micro-zeitgeist of its release to leave a lasting impression on the wider culture, which really just means like YouTube gamers. But you know. Other examples of this include the Normandy mission from Call of Duty 2, several missions from Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and No Russian from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. But until Clean House, I would argue that it had been at least a decade since the franchise had been able to break free from the inbuilt apathy of annualized releases. So what made this mission stand out so much? Why has it gotten so much attention? I unironically think that a big part of it is that if you enable the night vision in the game, screenshots of it look ridiculously realistic in a YouTube thumbnail. I mean, look at the reveal trailer of the game. There's a reason they used that image. But a lot of it, of course, also has to do with the environment design. So this is where the mission starts. Like I said earlier, what we're supposed to do is head up that way so that the mission can continue. But if we don't, and this is one of my favorite things about games like Call of Duty, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, everything just stops. Time effectively freezes, but we can move around freely, which gives you an opportunity to start soaking in so many details, both realistic and not so realistic. For example, inside the house, there are plates on the table with food remnants. In the back alley, there's a can of automotive paint on the ground. In the basement of the house, there's a pair of extremely high-quality breathable underwear. Wait a second, what brand are those?
Wir skippen.
So I want to start by taking a look at something in this mission that I'm sure no player has ever taken a good look at, and that I'm not really sure that the developers have taken a close look at. The sky. Now you might be thinking, who cares? It's just some stars. No, it's not. Look again. It's blurry, and it's blurry in a really weird way. The stars are all streaky, all in the same direction, just a little bit, and the left side of each star is just a little bright pinpoint. This is not a clear stock photograph of a night sky. This is something else. But what? And why? The effect is sort of similar to a very short version of those long exposure photographs of the night sky that you can find in like National Geographic, you know, the ones with the stars, how they make big circular patterns, and it's always like the most beautiful vista you've ever seen. You'll notice in those photos that stars closer or further to the center of rotation will leave shorter or longer streaks as the exposure continues. So if this skybox from Call of Duty is a real long exposure photograph, we should see the same effect. Some stars should have longer tails and some should have shorter tails. And we do. Sort of. It's subtle, but the stars further in this direction have shorter tails than the ones in this direction. To make things even weirder, there's another level in this game that uses a nighttime skybox, but that level has just a normal, non-smudgy nighttime skybox. It even has real constellations in it. You can see Orion.
Hat mich mit dem Punkt bisher noch gar nicht abgeholt. Möchte ich an der Stelle einfach mal sagen.
So they had one, but they didn't use it. I'm hugely curious what the story here is because no matter how you interpret it, Infinity Ward, the developers, either did something a little sloppy and didn't notice, or they did notice and they put it in the game anyway, or it was an intentional artistic choice. Either way, I'm a big fan. This skybox really adds a surreal, frozen in time feeling to the space because you see the mechanics of the photograph itself. If the sky looked perfectly realistic, we might believe we're in a living, breathing world, but because we can clearly see it's a photograph and that it's a frozen moment in time, which all photographs are, suddenly the world feels way too still and a little bit eerie. The sound
Da fiel mir jetzt ein bisschen zu sehr wie im Deutschunterricht Gedichtsanalyse, wo ich mir denke, das interpretierst du da rein? weiß ich nicht. Also da würde ich jetzt sagen, ich glaube, es kommen noch Punkte, wo ich sage, ja, das fühle ich, krass, schönes Detail und sowas. Das ist ein Punkt, der mich überhaupt nicht abholt. Ich glaube nicht, dass Infinity Ward sich dachte, wir machen den Himmel, das, was er gerade gesagt hat. Ich will es nicht nochmal wiederholen, weil das haben wir uns ja gerade angehört und durchgelesen in den Untertiteln. Ich glaube nicht dran. Aber wir gucken weiter.
Design is very good as well. The dog barking, the ambient wind sounds, the train going by. They could have easily set the mission in a much more gamifiable area like a warehouse or during a much more dramatic weather event like a thunderstorm, but the choice to put it in a residential neighborhood on a clear, calm, weird night is super important for the atmosphere, whether you notice the strange frozen skybox or not. And, I'm not going to dive into it really, but it also enhances the moment in the narrative because this is a very high-stakes mission that's meant to feel very tense. It has you going through a house, making quick choices about who's a threat and who's not, ostensibly putting you in a position where you could make serious mistakes. Ostensibly. In practice, like most Call of Duty games, it works out more like playing Time Crisis than an actual interactive ethical dilemma, and the stakes really aren't that high because the game checkpoints every 10 seconds. It can be fun, but not unlike a lot of big budget games, they kind of end up tying their shoelaces together in the execution. You know, the story of Call of Duty games, there's a lot to talk about, like the ethics or lack of ethics in the series, its role as military propaganda, whatever. All of that is worthy of discussion for sure. And if you're curious about that, I highly recommend these two videos. But I'm going to stick to this very specific topic of atmosphere and environment design. Now, before we take a look inside the clean house itself, one more detail to show you outside. Whoa, 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 whoa! There's an airplane! Dang, and it even has the green on one side, the red on the other side. Like, okay, that's just amazing. I'm absolutely blown away by that. Oh no, there's another one, but it's going that way. The fact that it's two airplanes and that they go different directions.
Übrigens hat noch niemand gegen mich gewonnen im Wer findet zuerst einen Satelliten. Ja, geisteskrank. Ihr wisst, ne? Habt ihr schon mal... Jetzt fährt hier ein Krankenwagen vorbei. Hört ihr das? Naja. Man kann ja Satelliten so verfolgen, man sieht das dann im Himmel, ne? Man sieht auch, dass es kein Flugzeug, sondern es ist wie so ein Stern, der sich bewegt. Oder Aliens, keine Ahnung. Jedenfalls, da bin ich der King drin.
It brings me
in nichts anderem, aber darin schon.
Such joy. That's such a pointless, inexplicable detail to add. It's not lore related, it's not even clever, it's not even really noticeable. I love it, and I think this is pretty high up there on the list of games that capture exactly what it looks and feels like to see a commercial airliner flying above you at night. Here's a side-by-side with some real footage I took the other night. This is a really, really good representation of that. Which, there's no reason to ever make a good representation of that very specific thing, but they did. All right, let's go inside the house.
3 SAS teams will get inside and connect the dots. If the wolf is in possession of the stolen Russian gas in Kazakhstan, we need to find him.
A lot has been made about this house. It's a great house. The visual design, the audio design, it's all really tense, immersive, and grounded. It has the same feel as the house in Resident Evil 7, or maybe even more so the one in PT, if you remember that demo. And it might be tempting to just assume that what makes all of these video game houses so immersive is that the developers took more time to add more, better detail. But that's not quite true. All three of these uncanny houses share in common a quality that very few video game houses have. They're the right size. Infinity Ward developers actually talk about this in detail in a 2019 interview with YouTube channel GameBrain, citing their desire to achieve a one-to-one scale with reality as being a high priority for them.
One-to-one scale is the major answer.
And they also drop a very interesting little bit of knowledge.
All previous games that have tried to show what it's like to do a night raid or to clean a house, they all do what we call video game scale, which is about 30% larger than real world scale.
Now, I've heard this before, and there are YouTube videos about it, but I've never actually checked it myself. So let's do that. Here's a doorway from 2007's Modern Warfare with a guy standing in it. Here's a doorway from 2019's Modern Warfare with another guy standing in it. This old doorway is very big, so you know, fair enough. I think we don't realize how small real doorways are because our spatial awareness in real life is a lot better than it is in a video game, so we don't need nearly as much room to effectively move around. But when you put these side by side, it almost seems egregious. It makes me want to build a real house 30% too big and then have people over for a dinner party and see if anyone notices. Maybe I'll do that for a YouTube video. I'll build a 10% too big house and a 20% too big house and a 30% and keep going until people are like, wait, what the hell's wrong with your house? Also, check out this gigantic bathroom in this house from the older game. This is how you can tell they really weren't hyper-focused on gritty realism back then, because there's no way this room was meant to be a bathroom from the get-go. This would be such an insane way to have a bathroom. Now, this true-to-life scale is also a part of PT and Resident Evil 7, and in that same previously cited interview, the developers of this mission specifically name-dropped those two games as inspirations for the design of Clean House, so I'm not just pulling them out of thin air. It does make me wonder what other games have realistically proportioned doorways. I assume something like Red Dead Redemption does, but beyond that, I'm not really sure. Post your realistically proportioned doorway games in the comments below. Maybe we'll make a video about that sometime. The question that I'm not really sure of the answer to is why being in a realistically proportioned environment makes us feel so odd in a video game. My best guess is that it's just because smaller areas are more claustrophobic and peripheral vision in a video game is non-existent, so it just feels too small to move around in. That, plus the fact that if you've been playing video games for a longer period of time, you'll have gotten used to the bloated scale in other games, so it'll be even more obvious that things here are shrunk down. But I'm honestly not totally sure. Okay, so what other weird details are there in this house? Let's run down a list of my favorites. You enter through the kitchen window, which is a little unconventional, but you know, guys dressed like this typically are. The first funny detail I noticed, the garbage cans in the house are empty. Every single one in the entire house. I might be able to buy this if it was only 1 or 2 people that lived here, but there are 15 people staying in this one house. No shot the garbage cans would be this clean, especially when 15 people staying in this one house. No shot it was only 1 or 2
Warum hat der Mann diesen Shot dafür verwendet für diese Szene?
15 people staying in this one house. No shot the garbage cans would be this clean, especially when the baby diaper hamper looks like it hasn't been emptied since they moved in. Maybe this is the chemical weapon they were talking about.
Wolf is in possession of the stolen Russian gas in Kazakhstan.
PU. Next, let's look at the bookshelves. You'll notice that there's an awful lot of these economics books sitting around. Listen, I like economics as much as the next conventional human man, but even I was shocked at how many they had. They have not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6,
ja, okay,
not
wie viele
not
denn?
8,
Mann,
not 9, but 52 economics textbooks in their house.
Das hätte man auch schon nach not 4 sagen können.
That's a lot of economics. The second most common book in this house is A History of the World, of which there are 12 copies. Okay, speaking of bookshelves, there are 2 bookshelves that are identical here, and they have identical books on them in this one room. The developers did a remarkable job of adorning this whole house with lots of bespoke details and making each room feel unique. So it's fun to see them do something lazy, like copy-paste a piece of furniture. We approve of this. I also found this wire plugged into a wall that doesn't connect to anything, and it actually goes right through this plastic box. This is confusing to me, because why even put the wire there then? Like, who goes out of their way to model a wire and then not model what it connects to? Just take out the wire, but actually leave it in because I like it. I counted that this house had 15 people living in it, or it did before I played the mission. And I was curious if there was enough beds for all of those, so I counted all the beds. There are 8 places to sleep for sure, assuming 2 people in each bed, plus 2 couches, and there are 14 adults staying in this house. So it's not technically enough, but I like the added detail of having this room with a bunch of makeshift mattresses on the floor, because it really makes it feel like they put too many.
Plus nicht jeder, der gerade irgendwie da ist, muss ja auch dort schlafen. Ne? Es gibt ja auch Leute, die sind zu Besuch da.
People in here for their they were having a little meeting, it doesn't matter, and they just had to come up with some sort of imperfect solution, so they just threw a bunch of mattresses in this extra room. And then my last 2 favorite details come by looking out the window. If you look way out in the distance, you'll see this tiny little sliver of some sort of wider city. It's very obviously just like a flat skybox, but you know, I love that stuff. And then secondly, if you wait long enough for the train.
Ich muss sagen, ich dachte, hier geht's eher darum, warum ist das so einnehmend, diese Mission, und dann wird da erklärt so, oh, weil das wirklich echte Militärtaktiken sind, weil hier Details schöne zu sehen sind und sowas, aber irgendwie ist das Video komisch, oder? Ich verstehe die Aussage des Videos noch nicht so ganz.
To go by, the train is completely empty.
Es gibt Punkte, wo er sagt, deshalb ist sie so geil und sowas, und dann gibt es aber wieder Punkte mit, deshalb ist sie komisch, also irgendwie wird analysiert, aber auch auf einem komischen Level.
There's not a soul on board, which is not impossible, but it is pretty creepy. The funny thing is, though, I'm not all that sure how much these sorts of details that I just showed you actually substantively contribute to the atmosphere of the mission. You know what I mean? Like, it would be really easy for me to YouTube essay my way into a conclusion by saying something like, all of these details may not be noticed by you consciously, but your brain notices them, and it makes you feel unsettled because it's not quite right. But would that actually be true? Like, obviously I can say it and it sounds like it could be true, but...
Es ist einfach nur so, dass du in eine Mission auch einfach nicht so viele unique Sachen reinmachen kannst, sondern und du gar nicht die Entwicklungszeit auch dafür hast wahrscheinlich. Sondern, naja, es soll halt einfach trotzdem, und jeder, der die Mission ganz normal spielt und nicht jeden Buchnamen liest, dem fällt oder sowas auch gar nicht auf, also.
That would be saying that if we like filled up these trash cans and increased the variety of books, that the mission suddenly wouldn't feel uncanny anymore. I doubt it. I don't think it's that simple. And to be honest, I'm gonna come clean. I just wanted to show you all this weird stuff I found because I thought it was cool. But regardless, you can't deny that this mission has a feel. It does have a real atmosphere.
Ich dachte, darum geht es in diesem Video.
Call of Duty has been weirdly good at this type of thing for a long time, and it generally doesn't get credit for it because the Venn diagram of people who like obvious army propaganda and people who like making little observations about odd places in video games is the overlap is approximately one person, and it's me. But these games, the good ones anyway, have always been incredibly immersive and engaging environmentally, and a lot of that work gets pumped into sequences that are over in a few minutes or less. The developers of Clean House said that the average playtime for this mission is about 8 minutes. That's a lot of detail for such a short mission. And it's not just Clean House.
Warum soll man für average 8 Minuten statt 52 Mal dieses Economy Book 52 Buchtitel sich ausdenken?
Of the recent trailers for Call of Duty Black Ops 6, there's a section of gameplay that takes place on the back of a motorcycle speeding through the streets of Washington, D.C. in the 90s. And while watching it, I was totally floored by it. All of this work for 20 seconds of gameplay. You know, it'd be one thing if these were just low-quality stock assets in the background from whatever asset website, or just some low-effort buildings meant to sort of feel vaguely Washington-y, but they're not. You know how I know they're not? Because I figured out where this takes place in Washington, D.C., and then I used the trailer to trace the path of the motorcycle through the streets and compare what we see in the trailer to what's actually there in real-life Washington, D.C. And it's... get ready. So the building from the trailer is Union Station in Washington, D.C. They call it Capitol Station in the trailer, but it's not. It's Union Station. Look at this. It's clear as day. They're the same thing. The motorcycle breaks through the front doors, goes out, around the statue and the flagpoles, then gets cut off by the feds, turns right, and then turns right again at the end of the block to come around the west side of Union Station. So it would be right here on the map if you look on Google. If you watch the trailer carefully, you'll see so many things done with care. The flagpoles, the grassy area, the fountain. It's awesome. But the greatest detail in this trailer comes a little further in the sequence. Let's freeze frame the shot right here. Look carefully at this. Just take this in for a second. Let me get out of the way. Now what I'm gonna do is show you the street view.
Warum will der auf sein Mate schießen? Sind die nie, oder warte mal, gehören die zusammen?
Of real life Washington, D.C. in the... It's awesome. But the greatest detail in this trailer comes a little further in the sequence. Let's freeze frame the shot right here. Look carefully at this.
Worauf schießt der? Ist ja auch egal.
Just take this in for a second. Let me get out of the way. Now what I'm going to do is show you the street view of real life Washington, D.C. in the exact same spot. Holy cow. Even down to the little vents and the parking garage outlets. These are not stock game development assets. These are bespoke models of the city. And on top of that, perhaps the most incredible thing about this whole trailer, this building on the left. Do you have any idea what that building is? This is, and I'm not joking, this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the real life Bureau of Labor Statistics, which means we got lore accurate Bureau of Labor Statistics in a video game before Grand Theft Auto 6. If you don't know why I'm so excited about that, you have some catching up to do on the channel. So, you know, there's a lot of justifiable cynicism about Call of Duty. And honestly, most of it I agree with pretty fervently. And it's not fair to pretend that this entry in the series 2019's Modern Warfare is your average Call of Duty game. By all accounts, it was the best one they made in years. And in the 5 years hence, they've made some real stinkers. Which certainly doesn't help the case for the series being worth paying close attention to. So honestly, maybe I won't go so far as to say that we've given Call of Duty an unfair shake. I've actually probably been excessively generous given how ridiculously money-hungry, anti-consumer, and historically revisionist the series is, but there's something about the vibe that I think is worth celebrating, even if we do it very quietly in a corner after spending the day being rightfully critical of the series. I'm Annie Austin. Thanks for watching.
Sehr komisches Video, möchte ich an der Stelle einfach mal gesagt haben. Es ist ganz anders gewesen, als ich dachte. Es hat mich trotzdem unterhalten. Ja, schreibt mir mal eure, vielleicht habe ich auch komplett überreagiert und ihr schreibt mir jetzt in die Kommentare, sag mal, der arme Typ oder so. Naja, schreibt es mir so oder so in die Kommentare. Ne? Ich würde sagen, wir sehen uns im nächsten Video oder im nächsten Livestream. Haut rein. Ciao, ciao.